Good evening, everyone, and welcome back after that short intermission. I just want to say a thank you to Lemohang and Bejeng for that wonderful kind of conversation, very intimate and telling of their relationship and Bejeng's knowledge of Lemohang's work. I believe many of you enjoyed the film, and I hope that that conversation was insightful for that. I'm going to be closing off the day with a reading from Audre Lorde's Sister Outsider. And I'll be reading two sections, one titled Poetry is Not a Luxury, and the other is The Transformation of Silence into Language and Action. So lean back, relax, and I'm going to begin. The quality of light by which we scrutinize our lives has direct bearing upon the product which we live and upon the changes which we hope to bring about through those lives. It is within this light that we form those ideas by which we pursue our magic and make it realized. This is poetry as illumination, for it is through poetry that we give name to those ideas which are, until the poem, nameless and formless, about to be birthed but already felt. That distillation of experience from which true poetry springs births thought, as dreams birth concept, as feelings birth idea, as knowledge births, precedes understanding. As we learn to bear the intimacy of scrutiny and to flourish within, as we learn to use the products of that scrutiny for power within our living, those fears which rule our lives and form our silences begin to lose their control over us. For each of us as women, there is a dark place within where hidden and growing our true spirit rises. Beautiful and as tough as chestnut, stanchions against our nightmare of weakness and of impotence. These places of possibility within ourselves are dark because they are ancient and hidden. They have survived and grown strong through that darkness. Within these deep places, each one of us holds an incredible reserve of creativity and power, of unexamined and unrecorded emotion and feeling. The woman's place of power within each of us is neither white nor surface. It is dark, it is ancient, and it is deep. When we view living in the European mode only as a problem to be solved, we rely solely upon our ideas to make us free, for these were what the white fathers told us were precious. But as we come more into touch with our own ancient, non-European consciousness of living as a situation to be experienced and interacted with, we learn more and more to cherish our feelings and to respect those hidden sources of our power from where true knowledge and therefore lasting action comes. At this point in time, I believe that women carry within ourselves the possibility for fusion of these two approaches, so necessary for survival, and we come closest to this combination in our poetry. I speak here of poetry as a revelatory distillation of experience, not the sterile wordplay that too often the white fathers distorted the word poetry to mean, in order to cover a desperate wish for imagination without insight. For women then, poetry is not a luxury. It is a vital necessity of our existence. It forms the quality of the light within which we predicate our hopes and dreams towards survival and change. First made into language, then into idea, then into more tangible action. Poetry is the way we help give name to the nameless so it can be thought. The farthest horizons of our hopes and fears are cobbled by our poems, carved from the rock experiences of our daily lives. As they become known to and accepted by us, our feelings and the honest exploration of them become sanctuaries and spawning grounds for the most radical and daring of ideas. They become a safe house for that difference so necessary to change and the conceptualization of any meaningful action. Right now, I could name at least 10 ideas I would have found intolerable or incomprehensible and frightening, except as they came after dreams and poems. This is not idle fantasy, but a disciplined attention to the true meaning of "it feels right to me." We can train ourselves to respect our feelings and to transpose them into a language so they can be shared. And where that language does not yet exist, it is our poetry which helps us to fashion it. Poetry is not only dream and vision, it is the skeleton architecture of our lives. It lays the foundations for a future of change, a bridge across our fears and what has never been before. Possibility is neither forever nor instant. It is not easy to sustain belief in its efficacy. We can sometimes work long and hard to establish one beachhead of real resistance to the deaths we are expected to live, only to have that beachhead assaulted or threatened by those cannots we have been socialized to fear, or by the withdrawal of those approvals that we have been warned to seek for safety. Women see ourselves diminished or softened by the falsely benign accusations of childishness, of non-universality, of changeability, of sensuality. And who asks the question, am I altering your aura, your ideas, your dreams, or am I merely moving you to temporary and reactive action? And even though the latter is no mean task, it is one that must be seen without the context of a need for true alteration of the very foundations of our lives. The white fathers told us, I think, therefore I am. The black mother within each of us, the poet whispers in our dreams, I feel, therefore I can be free. Poetry coins the language to express and charter this revolutionary demand, implementation of that freedom. However, experience has taught us that action in the now is also necessary, always. Our children cannot dream unless they live. They cannot live unless they are nourished. And who else will feed them the real food without which their dreams will be no different from ours? If you want us to change the world someday, we at least have to live long enough to grow up, shouts the child. Sometimes we drug ourselves with dreams of new ideas. The head will save us. The brain alone will set us free. But there are no new ideas still waiting in the wings to save us as women. As human, there are only old and forgotten ones. New combinations, extrapolations, and recognitions from within ourselves, along with a renewed courage to try them out. And we must constantly encourage ourselves and each other to attempt the heretical actions that our dreams imply. So many of our old ideas disparage. In the forefront of our move toward change, there is only poetry to hint at possibility made real. Our poems formulate the implications of ourselves, what we feel within and dare make real, or bring action into accordance with. Our fears, our hopes, our most cherished terrors. For within living structures defined by profit, by linear power, by institutional dehumanization, our feelings were not meant to survive. Kept around as unavoidable adjuncts or pleasant pastimes, feelings were expected to kneel to thought as women were expected to kneel to men. But women have survived as poets, and there are no new pains. We have felt them all already. We have hidden that fact in the same place where we have hidden our power. They surface in our dreams, and it is our dreams that point the way to freedom. Those dreams are made realizable through our poems that give us the strength and courage to see, to feel, to speak, and to dare. If what we need to dream, to move our spirits most deeply and directly toward and through promise, is discounted as a luxury, then we give up the core, the fountain of our power, our womanness. We give up the future of our worlds. For there are no new ideas, there are only new ways of making them felt, of examining what those ideas feel like being lived on Sunday morning at 7 a.m., after brunch, during wild lovemaking, making war, giving birth, mourning our dead. While we suffer the old longings, battle the old warnings, and fears of being silent and impotent and alone, while we taste new possibilities and strengths. I'm going to move on to the second piece now. This is titled The Transformation of Silence into Language and Action. I have come to believe over and over again that what is most important to me must be spoken, made verbal, and shared, even at the risk of having it bruised or misunderstood, that the speaking profits me beyond any other effect. I am standing here as a Black lesbian poet, and the meaning of all that waits upon the fact that I'm still alive and might not have been. Less than 2 months ago, I was told by 2 doctors, one female and male, that I would have to have breast surgery and that there was a 60 to 80% chance that the tumor was malignant. Between that telling and the actual surgery, there was a 3-week period of the agony of an involuntary reorganization of my entire life. The surgery was completed and the growth was benign. But without those 3 weeks, I was forced to look upon myself and my living with a harsh and urgent clarity that has left me still shaken but much stronger. This is a situation faced by many women, by some of you here today. Some of what I experienced during that time has helped elucidate for me much of what I feel concerning the transformation of silence into language and action. In becoming forcibly and essentially aware of my mortality and of what I wished and wanted for my life, however short it might be, priorities and omissions became strongly etched in a merciless light, and what I most regretted were my silences. Of what had I ever been afraid? To question or to speak as I believed could have meant pain or death, but we all hurt in so many different ways all the time, and pain will either change or end. Death, on the other hand, is the final silence, and that might be coming quickly, now without regard for whether I had ever spoken what needed to be said or had only betrayed myself into small silences while I planned someday to speak or waited for someone else's words. And I began to recognize a source of power within myself that comes from the knowledge that while it is most desirable not to be afraid, learning to put fear into a perspective gave me strength. I was going to die, if not sooner than later, whether or not I had ever spoken myself. My silences had not protected me. Your silence will not protect you. But for every real word spoken, for every attempt I had ever made to speak those truths, for which I am still seeking, I had made contact with other women while we examined the words to fit a world in which we all believed, bridging our differences. And it was the concern of and caring of all those women which gave me strength and enabled me to scrutinize the essentials of my living. The women who sustained me through that period were black and white, old and young, lesbian, bisexual, and heterosexual, and we all shared a war against the tyrannies of silence. They all gave me a strength and concern without which I could not have survived intact. Within those weeks of acute fear came the knowledge within the war we are all waging with the forces of death, subtle and otherwise, conscious or not. I am not only a casualty, I'm also a warrior. What are the words you do not yet have? What do you need to say? What are the tyrannies you swallow day by day and attempt to make your own until you will sicken and die of them, and still in silence? Perhaps some of you here today, I'm the face of one of your fears, because I'm woman, because I'm black, because I'm lesbian, because I'm myself, a black woman warrior poet doing my work. Come to ask you, are you doing yours? And of course, I'm afraid because the transformation of silence into language and action is an act of self-revelation, and that always seems fraught with danger. But my daughter, when I told her of our topic and my difficulty with it, said, tell them about how you're never really a whole person if you remain silent. Because there's always that one little piece inside you that wants to be spoken out. And if you keep ignoring it, it gets madder and madder and hotter and hotter. And if you don't speak it out one day, it will just up and punch you in the mouth from the inside. In the cause of silence, each of us draws the face of our own fear. Fear of contempt, of censure, or some judgment or recognition or challenge of annihilation. But most of all, I think we fear the visibility without which we cannot truly live. Within this country where racial difference creates a constant, if unspoken, distortion of vision, Black women have on one hand always been highly visible and so on the other have been rendered invisible through the depersonalization of racism. Even within the women's movement, we have had to fight and still do for that very visibility, which also renders us most vulnerable, our Blackness. For to survive in the mouth of this dragon we call America, and we have had to learn this first and most vital lesson, that we were never meant to survive, not as human beings. And neither were most of you here today, Black or not. And that visibility which makes us most vulnerable is that which also is the source of our greatest strength. Because the machine will try to grind you into dust anyway, whether or not we speak. We can sit in our corners, mute forever, while our sisters and ourselves are wasted, while our children are distorted and destroyed, while our earth is poisoned. We can sit in our safe corners, mute as bottles, and we'll still be no less afraid. In my house this year, we're celebrating the Feast of Kwanzaa, the African American Festival of Harvest, which begins the day after Christmas and lasts for 7 days. There are 7 principles of Kwanzaa, one for each day. The first principle is umoja, which means unity, the decision to strive for and maintain unity in self and community. The principle for yesterday, the second day, was kujichagulia, self-determination, the decision to define ourselves, name ourselves, and speak for ourselves instead of being defined and spoken for by others. Today is the 3rd day of Kwanzaa, and the principle for today is ujima, collective work and responsibility. The decision to build and maintain ourselves and our communities together and to recognize and solve our problems together. Each of us is here now because in one way or another we share a commitment to language and to the power of language and to the reclaiming of that language which has been made to work against us. In the transformation of silence into language and action, it is vitally necessary for each of us to establish or examine her function in that transformation and to recognize her role as vital within that transformation. For those of us who write, it is necessary to scrutinize not only the truth of what we speak, but the truth of that language by which we speak it. For others, it is to share and spread also those words that are meaningful to us. But primarily for us all, it is necessary to teach by living and speaking those truths which we believe and know beyond understanding. Because in this way alone, we can survive by taking part in a process of life that is creative and continuing, that is growing. And it is never without fear of visibility, of the harsh light of scrutiny and perhaps judgment, of pain, of death. But we have lived through all of those already in silence, except death. And I remind myself all the time now that if I were to have been born mute or had maintained an oath of silence my whole life long for safety, I would still have suffered and I would still die. It is very good for establishing perspective. And where the words of women are crying to be heard, we must each of us recognize our responsibility to seek those words out, to read them and share them and examine them in their pertinence to our lives, that we not hide behind the mockeries of separations that have been imposed upon us and which so often we accept as our own. For instance, I can't possibly teach Black women's writing. The experience is so different from mine. Yet how many years have you spent teaching Plato and Shakespeare and Proust or another? She's a white woman and what could she possibly have to say to me? Or she's a lesbian, what would my husband say? Or my chairman? Or again, this woman writes of her sons and I have no children. And all the other endless ways in which we rob ourselves of ourselves and each other. We can learn to work and speak when we are afraid in the same way we have learned to work and speak when we are tired. For we've been socialized to respect fear more than our own needs for language and definition. And while we wait in silence for that final luxury of fearlessness, the weight of that silence will choke us. The fact that we are here and that I speak these words is an attempt to break that silence and to bridge some of those differences between us. For it is not difference which immobilizes us, but silence, and there are so many silences to be broken. Thank you, everyone, for those who are here. Thank you for today. It was quite an insightful day. Thank you for attending. We'd love to hear more from you and engage with you further. So please do share as you have been, keep sharing some of the conversations, some of the things you're thinking. On social media, you can tag us at Zeitz MOCAA. And please do join us tomorrow. Tomorrow's theme is urban imaginaries, mobilities, and why so many borders. On the lineup are Pomatsipa, Emeka Okereke, Edgar Petersen, and Tauta Venga. It'll be moderated by our senior curator, Storm Janse van Rensburg. And we will also have a listening session by Chimurenga entitled Festac 77, which I know many of you are excited about. Thank you to all of our participants today. Diana Campbell, Bettencourt, Turang Rupa, we had Farid and Andan, Marie Helena, it was amazing. Bonaventure, Lemohang's film was amazing, and thank you to Poking as well for that stimulating conversation. Thank you so much and see you tomorrow.